Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We have finished our SEC football predictions, and now we are starting our ACC football predictions. And our first team is coming off their third straight college football playoff appearance and have the team and the coach to make it their fourth straight appearance. They are the Clemson Tigers. Clemson is going to be a threat both in the ACC and nationally, and like I said, are definitely poised for a fourth straight trip to the college football playoff. They returned 7 starters on offense and 8 starters on defense, and that defense is probably the best in the entire nation. 8 starters returning, including Clelin Ferrell, Dexter Lawrence, Christian Wilkins, and Austin Bryant, all along that defensive line, by far the best defensive line in all of college football. And then Kendall Joseph leading that linebacking core for the Tigers. They brought in some major recruits on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. But this defense is going to be the strength for the Tigers this year, and by far the best in the nation. On offense, 7 returning starters there. A bit of a quarterback situation there with Kelly Bryant facing off against Trevor Lawrence, the number 1 pro-rated quarterback coming out of high school, so a big-time get for Dabo Swinney and the Tigers. I think that Kelly Bryant will start the season. I think you're taking a quarterback that a lot of people weren't super impressed with last year, but I thought did fairly well, getting them all the way back to the college football playoff to meet Alabama for the 3rd straight year. And of course, they lost in that semifinal game. But I think he should open up as a starter. He has experience. He knows how to play against some of these tougher opponents. But I do think that we will see Trevor Lawrence at some point this season. If Bryant struggles, whether that's on the road against Texas A&M, maybe on the road against Georgia Tech, or maybe it's somewhere at home against a Syracuse, or even against one of these weaker opponents, I think you see Trevor Lawrence. Of course, if they're blowing out some of these teams, Trevor Lawrence will have his chance to come in there and show the staff what he's capable of, and maybe he can overtake Bryant at some point this season. But I do think that he should be the starter for the beginning of the season, and at least for that first part of the season. Travis Etienne comes in at running back, solid running back there. Then Hunter Renfrow as well, senior wide receiver, obviously a Tigers favorite for Clemson, bringing a big time strength at the wide receiver position. And then 3 of their 5 starters on the offensive line come back, so it'll be very solid there. So we'll go ahead and dive into their schedule. Easy win against Furman to open up, no doubt. And Clemson's going to be a top 5 team, should be a top 5 team to start the season. So obviously, fairly highly ranked, should be a lock, or not a lock, but looking for that 4th straight trip to the playoff at Texas A&M in week 2. And that's a very, very intriguing matchup. Obviously, kind of renewing that rivalry between Dabo Swinney and Jimbo Fisher, leaving Florida State to go take the Texas A&M job. So he had experience facing the Tigers. Tigers had experience facing what his teams used to look like at Florida State. This is a different Texas A&M team. He's bringing in a new style. I like their quarterback in Nick Starkel. That brings him a little more experience. 16 returning starters there. The defensive line, the offensive line are going to be solid for the Aggies this year. So with that line led by Ferrell and Lawrence and Wilkins and those guys, can they break through that A&M offensive line and try to rattle Starkel a little bit? I think they'll shut down Travion Williams, the Texas A&M running back. Shouldn't have much of a ground game there. It's going to be a fun matchup down in College Station, but I'm giving the Tigers a win here. I just think they have way too much experience. A&M bringing in the new head coach from a team that was just mediocre last year. So I think it'll be fun. It'll be a close game for probably about 3 quarters, but I think they end up pulling away in the end. Georgia Southern, another win there. And then at Georgia Tech, this is a team that at Clemson last year only lost 24-10, so they hung with the Tigers last year. And I actually like this Georgia Tech team a little bit, a chance to maybe get back to a bowl game, just missing out last year. Taquan Marshall, big-time dual threat quarterback. We know the type of offense Georgia Tech runs. They need a quarterback like that, and Marshall had a very solid year last year, so maybe he could give this Clemson defense a little bit of some issues, especially with the home crowd on their side. They returned 5 on defense, 8 on offense, so Georgia Tech could be a fairly solid threat, probably their biggest threat to open up the season early on in September, but I still think the Clemson's going to be able to go on the road and get a win over the Yellow Jackets. I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue there. And then Syracuse, obviously a big revenge game for Clemson. Their only loss in the regular season last year came on the road to Syracuse, and what was a major upset, the Tigers being ranked number 2 at the time. But Kelly Bryant went down with an injury in that game, and Syracuse was able to capitalize off of that and ended up winning a close game. So this time it's back at Clemson. Syracuse, a team that returns a lot of offensive starters from that team that upset Clemson. but it is in Death Valley, and this is a Syracuse team that has a very good offense led by Dino Babers. I like their defense, should be a little more improved, but just I don't think had a chance to come on the road and defeat Clemson. They hung with Miami last year on the road. I don't think that's going to be the case for Syracuse this year. Another win for Clemson. And then at Wake Forest, this was a game that I would have leaned maybe a little bit towards Wake Forest's way, maybe for a potential upset if they had not lost John Walford last year. He was one of the better quarterbacks I had seen play at Wake Forest, one of the better quarterbacks in the ACC. Great year for him last year, and I would lean that way for Wake Forest because they have so many wide receivers returning this year, so they're going to have a very solid core there. They do bring in Kendall Hinton, the quarterback that was backing up for Walford last year, put up some decent numbers when he played, but it's on the road. They lost Walford. The defense I'm a little concerned about. I'm going to give Clemson a win on the road, but this is certainly not a game that they need to overlook. So a win there. And then big-time bye week going into North Carolina State in the home stretch of the season. North Carolina State, last year's game down at North Carolina State was actually fairly close for Clemson. I can't remember the exact score, but it was very close, and they bring Ryan Finley in, returning last year, one of the better quarterbacks in the nation for the Wolfpack. And so maybe he can give this Clemson defense a little bit of trouble. It is at Clemson, though. I don't like the Wolfpack's chances. I especially do not like this Wolfpack defense. I'm very concerned about the defense this year. They lost a lot of starters, namely Bradley Chubb, top 5 draft pick last year, or top 6 draft pick in the NFL last year. So they lose a lot of starters on that defensive side of the ball from a 9-win team last year. Clemson gets a home win over the Wolfpack, and what will be a close game for a little bit, but will end up pulling away late. And then at Florida State, this is another one of those games I looked at, and I said, if Clemson's going to lose one, it's going to be maybe at Florida State, bringing in Willie Taggart from Oregon. Obviously, a big-time offensive-minded coach. They get DeAndre Francois back, obviously, who got hurt in that game against Alabama to start the season last year. So assuming he starts, which I think he will and should, obviously a solid dual-threat quarterback there. Cam Akers back for the Seminoles as well. Problem is, only 4 returning starters on the defensive side of the ball. So Florida State and Clemson usually have close matchups. There have been plenty of blowouts in the past, I know, and in recent memory, but usually they're pretty close, and this is the game that decides who's going to win this division. So it's on the road. That's not a sign pointing up for Clemson, but the fact that Clemson's defense is going to be so strong and their offense is also going to be extremely strong against a weaker Florida State defense. I know they have talent there, but it's going to be a little weaker under Taggart to start off. I think they're going to get a close win down in Tallahassee. So a big-time win for Clemson there, one that will play a huge role in these standings. And then Louisville back at home. If you remember 2 years ago, this was a thrilling game. I believe it was 42-36 Clemson, Deshaun Watson, and Lamar Jackson going at it. So it was an epic game. Last year's not so much at Louisville. This year, Louisville doesn't even have Lamar Jackson. They have Jawan Pass, who has a solid crew of wide receivers, led by Jalen Smith, of course, but not a great defense, just like the problem with Florida State and North Carolina State. A number of these ACC schools are losing a lot of starters on the defensive side of the ball. Bobby Petrino knows how to coach his offense. We'll have a lot of faith in him, but this game is at Clemson, and Clemson is just overall going to be a much better team than the Cardinals will. And a win there as well. So they are looking at a potential undefeated season here, just 3 games away from capping that off, getting back to the ACC championship game, and one more win away from the college football playoff. At Boston College, another potential trap game for the Tigers. A Boston College team that I really, really like this year to pull off a couple upsets in the ACC. They bring in Anthony Brown, a quarterback who put up some decent numbers last year before getting hurt. But the big-time player, as we all know, is going to be A.J. Dillon, the freshman that rushed for nearly 2,000 yards last year. Kind of burst onto the scene against Louisville, rushing for over 200 yards in that game. It's at Boston College. They returned 6 starters on defense, 10 on offense. So a Boston College team that usually struggles on offense is not going to struggle this year. And then they usually have a solid defense, and they return 6 starters on that side of the ball. So this is a potential trap game for Clemson, especially this late in the season. So I was very back and forth on whether I'm going to pick the Eagles or pick the Tigers. I'm going to go with the Tigers on this one solely because of Clemson's defense. I think they have a little more success there. And if they can shut down A.J. Dillon, I have a lot of faith in them winning this game. So a close win for Clemson there. And then Duke and South Carolina, both home games to round out the year. Duke bringing in Daniel Jones and a solid head coach in David Cutcliffe, one that I know to never doubt, usually putting up some great numbers with the Blue Devils, done a great job with that program and should get them back to a bowl game. I like Daniel Jones at quarterback, and I like this Duke defense this year, but it is at Clemson, and I just don't think they're going to have enough talent to come in and get the win there. And then South Carolina to close the season at home. A South Carolina team that I like this year that I have going 9-3. Jake Bentley, Debo Samuel, Rico Dowdle on offense, and a Will Muschamp defense is always a good sign to pull off an upset here. But it is at Clemson, and this defense I know is going to be wanting to get that undefeated season under the belt. The question will be, when does Kelly Bryant or Trevor Lawrence step in? Nonetheless, with it being at home, with it being so close to an undefeated season, a big-time rivalry game, Clemson has owned South Carolina these past couple of years, and I think they get another win here over the Gamecocks to get a 12-0 season on the year. Obviously, getting a berth in the ACC championship game, more than likely against Miami, who they had just annihilated last year in the ACC championship game, and then to the college football playoff for the potential 4th straight year. So, of course, they'd have to win the ACC championship for that. Of course, we'll address that later on. If we're looking at this Clemson schedule, if there's a game that they're going to trip up in, it's going to be Florida State or Boston College. I think this half of the schedule is fairly simple for the Tigers. Nothing that worries me too much. The A&M game will be a little tricky, but other than that, should be fine there. It's just going to be this half. Florida State and Boston College. If Clemson's going to lose a game or 2 games, which I highly doubt, I think it would be to the Seminoles and to the Eagles. But I think Clemson is going to have enough talent, especially with that defensive line that is so strong, and the defense overall that is probably the best in the nation, in my opinion. I just don't see many teams putting up enough points against Clemson, who still has a potent offense as well, to be able to defeat the Tigers this season. And then it's all going to come down to the college football playoff, and will we have a 4th straight year of Alabama versus Clemson, whether it's in a semifinal or in the national championship? We will have to wait and see, but signs will be pointing very high to that with a 12-0 Clemson Tigers team. So as always, please go check us out on Twitter at Gridiron Expert, and also on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert. And as always, here on YouTube, please continue to like, comment, and subscribe, and we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.